Trails and Ghost Towns. Share the adventures of our early pioneers as we explore the development of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. With your host, Mike Roberts, and historian Bill Barlee.
Welcome to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. I'm Mike Roberts, and with me is Bill Barlee, our storyteller and tour guide for gold, silver, and who knows what other kinds of things. We've been to Sandon before, but I always love it when we talk about the magnates, the captains of industry. Who are we talking about today?
Well, we're talking about one individual, Mike, who was called the King of Sandon, or the King of the Silver City, which Sandon was known as. He was a Virginian. He came from an aristocratic Southern family. And he was, I think, and I think perhaps rightly labeled, the richest man in the Kootenays, at least at one juncture. His name was John Morgan Harris, and he lived in that area virtually for over 60 years.
Okay. John Morgan Harris, the subject of tonight's Gold Trails and Ghost Towns, when we come back from this break. Welcome back to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Mike Roberts with Bill Barlee, and we're talking today about a captain of industry, John Morgan Harris. But what is this southern gentleman from Virginia doing in Sandon?
Well, he didn't start in Sandon, Mike. He drifted west with a lot of other people after the Civil War, and he had some money in his pocket. He ends up in Wallace, Idaho, which is a very interesting area because it's an old mining town. He comes in there when Wallace is just getting on the map. He establishes a real estate empire there, Mike, and he builds the racetrack. He's a man about town. He's a ladies' man, and but something goes wrong, and we don't know what happens in Wallace. But he does sell out all his holdings in Wallace, and he decides to head north over the Canadian line, which is rather interesting. And he comes over the Canadian line with probably around $15,000 or $20,000, which is a big stake in the 1890s. He heads for Canada in 1892. He heads for the heart of the silver country. And the heart of the silver country is a fledgling camp called Sandon. And Sandon is eventually become the great town of the silvery Slocan.
Now, we've got this is an early artist's rendering of what you could find in Sandon. It's a great thing because it shows the nature, the lay of the land, and it shows where all of the various components were.
Yeah, this is a very, very fine print, Mike. And the reason is because it shows you where Sandon is situated, and it's surrounded in concentric circles by mines. Some at the lower level, some at the medium level, some at high levels. Some of those mines at the 7,000-foot level. And the richest mines of all, the Payne and the Noble Five and the American Boy and the Slocan Star and another one called the Rico, they're very rich. Some of them are producing 2,000 ounces to the ton. Now, John Morgan Harris comes in. He's going to establish an empire, but he decides to take a chance on one property. He takes a chance on a property he calls the Rico, R-E-C-E-A-U, which is interesting. Later, that name is changed to R-E-C-O. Now, and virtually all of the Americans who are coming into town are mining magnates, and they all come from the state of Washington. And what they do is they actually take their mining company and they establish it in the state of Washington, usually in Spokane.
And because Washington, I guess Spokane's the closest major city with some clout. The courts are there, registries there.
Yeah.
This isn't one of Harris's companies, but it does show there's the state of Washington noted up there.
Yeah.
And
this is 1897 as well.
The Wonderful Group.
The Wonderful Group, yeah. Quite a well-known mine in that Sandon area. So that's typical of some of the mines. Now what happens, of course, is that he hits it on the Rico. It's narrow vein, but extremely rich. Thousands of ounces per ton. And John Morgan Harris, this is the beginning of his mining empire. And he hits it so well that in those first years, in 96 and 97, he is making, Mike, between $100,000 and $200,000 a year. Now, by today's standards, that is not a lot. But by the standards of 1896 and 1897, when a depression is settling over the country, it's staggering. You multiply that by 40, probably by 40. That's right. So he'd be making $4 million a year, which means now he not only established the Rico mine, Mike, he goes downtown and he builds himself a brand new hotel called the Rico Hotel. He shortens the name to R-E-C-O. He also establishes the Rico Milling and Mining Company. Rico Avenue is in early Sandon. in the 1890 Sandon. And the only place he deviates, he establishes the Slocan Power Company.
So he was also building the utilities that would serve the town and all his needs.
Oh, sure he was.
Well,
sure.
at $4 million a year, I guess he had the capacity for this. This is, I mean, all through. He was an integrated corporation. He did a little of everything very well.
Yeah, he did, and he's a very young man. Remember this, in 1894, in his early 20s. And here's a photograph of John Morgan Harris as he looked around 1894 or 1896. Probably this photograph is taken in 1896.
Not a big man.
No, he isn't a big man. He's quite small, but he's very vigorous. He's very analytical, extremely sharp, an intelligent human being is what he is. And he's a kind of guy that he had a certain charisma or charm, whatever you want to call it, and people remembered this guy right from the first time they met him. And he really made an impact on people. I find it very, very interesting.
I'd remember a man who made $4 million a year, too. That would be a very memorable component.
Oh, sure.
And was he well liked, in addition to being just the kind of person you wanted to attach yourself to?
Well, I've got most of his papers. I don't think he had any very close personal friends. He had two partners. Mm-hmm. One guy called Texas Kelly, and Texas Kelly was his partner, equal partner in the Slocan Power Company and in his mine and everything else. But eventually he is, I think, eased out. And then another individual comes in, Clara Smith, and he becomes a very, very minor partner of John Morgan Harris's for years.
Now, in a town like Sandon, population about this time what?
About 2,000, Mike.
So he would have the hotel. I mean, the Rico Hotel.
Yeah.
Would it be state-of-the-art, 1896 sometime?
Sure. Now here's a picture of the Rico Hotel, and this is how it looked in early Sandon. This is pre-fire Sandon, and this is how Sandon itself looks when you look down the main street of Sandon in 1896 or 97. And this is a long, narrow main street right out of sight. Those buildings carry right out of sight. Very, very fascinating town, typical of the mining towns of the Pacific Slope, Mike.
So he's got the hotel, he's got the milling company, he's got a mining company, he's got the utility company, and it's rolling in.
That's right, but a few clouds on the horizon. Several things happen. First thing is, the price of silver from 1893 begins a gradual decline, and it starts to decline steadily. Not like gold, gold's on the gold standard, but silver goes down, down, down. This is bound to affect all the silver producers, bound to affect the miners in the area, which it does. Second thing that happens, Mike, is 1898 rush in late 97, early 98 into the Yukon. Draws a lot of miners and draws some mine owners out of Sandon.
Even though they're still, I mean, the silver may be slipping, but they're still rich mines there, aren't there?
Sure.
Sandon's still rich.
Oh, yeah, sure it is. It's still doing very well, and it becomes an incorporated city in 1898. And so, you know, it has 24 hotels, it has scores of businesses, it has 2 railroads, you know, the K&S and the N&S, and they're doing quite well. But what happens then, on May the 4th, 1900, the first serious blow to Sandon, which I alluded to in one other program, actually, and it's the fire of May the 4th, 1900. And what happens? It sweeps down Rico Avenue and virtually wipes out the entire main street. It leaves on the other side, it leaves one major building that John Morgan Harris still owned. And that major building actually was the Rico Barn. Now, he wasn't about to waste any money. The rest of the town is wiped out. John Morgan Harris owns the one building that is still standing, the one major building. He turns it around and puts a front on the barn, which is strange because it's a strange-looking building.
It's kind of tilted, isn't it?
That's right. That becomes the Rico Hotel.
The second Rico Hotel.
The second Rico Hotel, Rico Hotel number 2, and still a very, very fine hotel. When you ate in the Rico, you ate with dishes like this, Mike.
John Morgan Harris didn't miss a chance. I mean, he knew he was in Canada. He was still an American, of course, but he knew that this would have the desired effect on the kind of clientele he wanted to approach. That's
right, and the cutlery was also engraved Rico, which is interesting. And I find it kind of fascinating because this guy was really quick off the mark. He established himself very quickly. He also
the smoke isn't out of the valley yet, right? I mean, the place has burned down, and because remember the fire was what, the 4th?
4th of May.
On August the 30th, 1900, he's inviting everybody to the opening of his new Rico Hotel.
Yeah.
And look at the script. Yourself and friends cordially invited to attend.
Yes, his English was not, or at least the printer's English was not perfect. But we're a little late for the invitation, but of course, he also, right next, virtually